I actually had a couple of requests asking about our cases that we used to hold and store, transport all the equipment in. So this is just something real quick that shows the cases that we use and maybe what's in them. And to start off with, these yellow and black tubs that you see here, they carry our tarps, mostly our tarps, and some runners, some of those rubberized runners that you see us using that covers the snake and the power. These tub kind of things, these totes, they're okay, but they are definitely not the best. We left some out in the sunlight during one gig, and anyway, long story short, the sides of these cases sort of morphed just due to the weight pushing down on them, especially on the very bottom when the sides started bulging. So I'm looking for some replacements. So that's what we use for those, for the tarps. And then over here, the small top one here, right there, that's the Personas 1642. Down below that is the front of house rack that we use. It's got a voltage regulator in it, the PDU, and a DBX 260. We use this case here for the shows when we use digital boards. The bottom rack here has got two QSE PLD 4.2 amps and one QSE 1602 amp. And for the smaller shows, when we don't need much power, we use this rack down here. But also, we've used this bottom rack over here. We took one of the QSEs, combined all four channels into one, and we had a 1600 watts, which turned out pretty good. And then over here, next in the RCF, there's two RCF HDL10As. We use these for center fills for larger shows. And over here, let's see what's that's the back. Top case here, this is mics. It's vocal mics and instrument mics, as well as DI boxes, windscreens. This other box, identical size, that is our communications. You see us sometimes using the comms. Well, this is usually for administration. We have voltages, like inverse square law information in it that we use. I use this to go out and size some of the shows. This case here, this is a rack that we occasionally use when we do monitors, separate monitors, but we don't use it too often. I'll probably end up repurposing this rack for something else. Down below it, we've got a large rolling rack. This contains two snakes, a bunch of speaker cables, and some power. There's probably about 250, 300 pounds of weight just in this bottom one here. This one does get abused quite a bit, but it has held up really well. Okay, now we're at the other end here. This case here, this is for our Personas, the Series 3. It's a 32 channel. Let me get that out of the way. All right, and then we've got some cases sitting up here. This is just for overhead that we use, like this one here, 10 supplies. That's just a case of different kinds of tape that we use to tape equipment down. Pardon me, tape the electrical lines down. We tape the snake down. This case here, this is, there's two power supplies in here. There are two backup power supplies, one for our Allen Heath and one for our Soundcraft. This one down here, this is the wireless rack. There's two transmitters, two receivers, and a drawer in here. Anyway, this is strictly for the wireless. Down here, this is a, let's get down here. This bottom rack here with letter A on it. This is rack 2 of 2. That has outboard gear in it, like gates, compressors, EQ. And let's see, this case right here, this is rack 1 of 2 for the outboard gear. This has a PDU in it. It had the voltage regulator, a DBX 260 in it, and some other stuff in it. We use this rack here and that rack, the bottom one there, for when we do outdoor shows. I think you've probably seen videos of both those racks. These are them right here. The one down here, this is the amplifier rack. It's got two crowns, two QSE PLXs, two QSE PLDs, and it's got a 50 amp 240 volt service at the very bottom of it. And over here, just as the case says, this is all of our XLR cables. There's probably about 120, most of them about 30 feet in length. We do have some that are maybe 10 feet, but we also have a few that are, I think they're around 50 feet. And it's those long ones that we use when we fly the speakers, so we can have a continuous line going from the top of the speakers all the way down. Okay, and the one on the very bottom here, just as it says, it's power. We've got a lot of 10 gauge, it's all SOOW power cables. There's other power cables in there as well. We do have some 240 volt 50 amp service cables in here. Okay, here we're back in the sort of the tighter end of our storage area. And here's the bottom case there. You've seen that holds our Soundcraft GB8 24 channel board analog. And it's the one we use when we do larger shows. All right, well that concludes the cases that we have. This is about most that we'd probably ever need and probably ever want to use. All right, here's some bonus footage here for you. How often has it been that you've moved cases around only to have them roll away on their own like this? This can be a problem, but it's really easy to fix. All you got to do is get the wheels going 90 degrees off of where they were. So I'm pushing this case away from this other one. Then I'm going to push it against the case. Now the wheels are 90 degrees off from where they were, so now the case won't roll away. So you don't need a brake on it, on the casters, and you certainly don't need to put something down there to stop it from rolling. Okay, probably like a lot of you out there, you probably have these type of caster boards. They're rather inexpensive, and we use them just to put stuff on while it's in storage so we can move stuff around, so we're not having to lift, especially if we don't have to. The caster boards like this are okay. They're certainly not the best, but they do work, but there's sort of a drawback with them, and especially if, like we're using these kind of caster boards to carry speakers on. Now the speakers have quite a bit more weight, if you will, up front on the board than they do in the rear, and sometimes that can lead to the whole unit like starting to tip over, especially if you hit something small like a rock on the floor. So what this means is that as you're moving this across the floor, I've got the tape down there to help show direction. As you're moving across the floor, you've really got to balance it. So if I want to move this forward, I really need to balance what's going on. Not so much moving it back, but moving it forward just because of the weight. And then while you're pushing it, it's like all of a sudden you hit something and the whole thing starts to go over. Oh no. Okay, so here's a little trick in moving casters like this type of caster with this kind of weight around. So there's two speakers standing up top here, and this is it's about 6 feet tall, and there's probably at least 120 pounds of weight on it. So it is sort of top heavy, so it is sort of easy to get it to fall over. Okay, so here's what you're going to want to do in moving these kinds of casters. These type of caster boards, actually, especially when you're carrying a lot of weight on them, is don't push it forward, don't track it like that. What you want to do is turn a corner. Put a corner in the direction you want to go and move it that way. Because what you're doing here is you're putting something up front that can capture any of the weight in case the weight that you're carrying starts to tip over, because it will not tip forward straight ahead. It's just a lot stabler to move it that way. Now I am pushing on the top of it. I'm trying to push it over, but it's not working. Now, I'll turn it like this. Now if I push it over, it's easy to push over. So, if you need to move something heavy on these small type of cheap casters, just take the corner, head it toward the direction you want to go, and just push it that way. All right, hope this helps.